We started by talking about the body and how to take care of it, and then we moved into the emotions and how to recognize that they come with the body. Just like you have a liver and a spleen and a kidney, and kidneys and nervous system, you also have an emotional body, an emotional system that needs to be nurtured properly, well-fed, well taken care of, right? Well exercised, well stretched. You need to have full dynamic range of your emotions. And then you have to get into the layers of psychology now. So, mind. What is mind? What's happening with mind? So, the first thing to understand is that no child is born with a mind. You're born empty. Mind is content. Stories, identifications, beliefs, values, family, religion, work. All of this is mind. You're not born with any of it. Because if you were adopted at childhood, you wouldn't know who your parents are. Remember, you don't know who you are. You don't have a name. You don't know what day you were born. You have no direct evidence of where you came from. And you're just not capable. We're born and everything is, you're in a state of synesthesia. Your sight and your sound and your flavors are still very blurry and learning to come into focus. Slowly, your eyes start to resolve. And instead of seeing light and shadow, you begin to see more details and colors. If your ears are functioning properly, you begin to notice that sounds are coming from one side or coming from the other. You can turn your head. The child will turn its head towards a sound. Right? Your taste buds slowly start to develop. Everything starts to turn on. In the meantime, you're surrounded by adults and people that are bigger than you, typically that are talking to you. They're saying things like, Ma, 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 Pa, 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 Raphael, Eric, right? How many times did your mother have to say your name before you learned it? Once, twice, a million times? Millions of times. It's repetition over and over and over again. It's repeated so much that you actually believe that I'm Raphael. Of course I'm Raphael. You're Eric. How do you know? I've always known. Well, no, actually, you weren't born knowing what your name was. You didn't know anything when you were born. We could hang you from a tree, and you would grab on with your little fingers. If we put a nipple in front of your mouth, you would grab it and start sucking from it. That's all you could do. You couldn't smile. You couldn't be angry. You could sneeze. You could cough. That's it. You can't do anything. You can swallow. Right? You can wet your pants. Slowly you begin to develop, and you start to have a sense of awareness of yourself. It takes a couple of years before you can authentically say, me, mine. I've read that a newborn, a one-day-old chimpanzee baby, monkey, little baby chimpanzee, is as self-aware, if not more self-aware than a typical 3-year-old human child. This is how raw, how unprocessed, how undeveloped we're born. We have to be born early because our head is so big that we wouldn't be able to stay 3 more years inside of the mother. We wouldn't be able to come out. There isn't enough space in the pelvic bone cavity for the baby to come out. So we're born premature. So we're not born aware or self-aware. All animals are born aware and self-aware. We're not born that. We don't have it. So we develop our awareness and our self-awareness, and it's plastic as it can be molded by our environment. So in the first 4 or 5 years of our life, 3, 4, 5 years of our life, we learn 75 to 80, 85, 90% of all the behavior patterns of who we are, what we are, how we live, what our family is, what the order is, what the hierarchies are, who's in command. All of this gets sorted out pre-verbally in the first few years, before you even have a sense of self. You don't even have a sense of gender identification. Somebody tells you that you're a boy or a girl. It's only somewhere around the age of 4 or 5, 3, 4, or 5, that you begin to notice that if you're a boy, you pee standing up and the girl's squat. Behind a tree, you're peeing on the tree and the girl is squatting. And then you begin to go, oh, we're different. Otherwise, you have no sense of gender identification, but it's the first thing that gets put on your birth certificate. You have no sense of name, but it gets put down on your birth certificate too. Right? Then we're born, and our little pure white sponge of potential consciousness lands in whatever puddle whatever pond, whatever lake, whatever ocean where that our culture is. And then you absorb that. So you were born in a Tongan culture. I was born in a bourgeois European expat culture in Lima, Peru. So I was absorbed certain values about authority and position and childhood, what you're supposed to be, what your roles are, all that kind of stuff. Right? But if we traded places, then I would have absorbed the Tongan values. You would have absorbed the Peruvian values. Jantra absorbed the Cambodian and Thai values. Somebody else would absorb other values. It just doesn't matter where your values aren't determined by your DNA. It doesn't matter what you look like. Whatever you absorb is what you absorb. Your culture is the soup that you land in. Right? If I take milk and I take a cheese starter culture or a yogurt starter culture and I mix it in, it'll turn into cheese or yogurt because the culture will transform. But what happens with that culture when it gets used over and over and it gets too old? It starts to rot. Our cultures are rotted and out of date. And they're hurting us because the conditions, the rules, the origins of those cultures go back thousands of years and they have nothing to do with the reality of today. Our mind is the accumulation of all of that. So one way I like to look at mind is imagine that we're sitting here and we're sharing a large multi-topping pizza, right? So you take a slice, I take a slice, and we bite into it. Now, the crust is the same. The sauce is the same. The cheese is the same. But the distribution of toppings is slightly different. I get a little more pepperoni and mushrooms, you get a little more peppers and pineapple, whatever it is, it doesn't really matter. Right? So on the outside, we're slightly different. But on the inside, we're all the same. So we all have similar bodies. Okay, we're all slightly different, but we all need a certain amount of air, water, and blood sugar, and proteins, and fats. Yeah, right? And we're all different, and we respond to things differently, but we all get angry about something, we all get happy about something, we all get horny about something, we all feel guilt and shame about something, right? Like, we all feel that, right? So it's all the same. On top of that, if you look back at how we inherit our cultures over the past 10,000 or more years, there's even evidence now that we may have inherited some cultural components from Neanderthals that could go back 100 million, 200 million years ago. Language, beliefs, certain components of that may have even been crossbreeded or hybrids with the Neanderthals. Now we're not looking so much as a pizza with multiple layers, we're looking at a lasagna that has a distribution of toppings on the top. But the layers keep going deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper, and they go back thousands, 10,000 years. Yeah. And along the way, those layers are 10,000 years old. They're rotting in there. There's bad stuff in there. We've accumulated junk DNA, and we've accumulated junk thought, junk mind. But we hold on to it because my grandfather didn't eat chicken, and I don't eat chicken. Really? Well, my grandfather didn't eat pork, and his grandfather and the sons of Abraham didn't eat whatever they didn't eat. Or Muhammad. I'm talking 1,500 years, 2,000 years, 3,000 years ago. Yeah. What does that have to do with reality today? That's very superficial. I'm not picking on anybody's religion or their dietary choices, obviously. Yes? I'm just using it as an example so that you get a sense of what have you been in. Well, the Tongans, it's the fifth born is this. Well, with the Asian people, the first child has to do this, right? Or the firstborn daughter, the eldest daughter has to sacrifice herself, or the second or third one has to. You have to sacrifice yourself for your parents who made you, who suffered for you. They brought you life. You should sell yourself. You should do anything to help them. Even if they're alcoholics, they're drunk, they're gambling. You still need to sacrifice yourself for these idiots because they're your family. They're toxic and they're poisonous. And you're caught in a construct. It's a matrix. It's a lot. It doesn't help you. It doesn't empower you. Right. So you have the freedom, especially when your body's healthy and your emotions are healthy. You're going to get a clear emotional response to, I'm not doing that. I'm the what? Yeah, right. Wake up. Grow up, okay? This doesn't exist anymore. I'm not doing that teach it for you. No way. Do it yourself. Like you get to a point where you feel healthy enough that you can confront these challenges and go, that's not real. That's not existential. This is a mental construct. It's a cultural construct. It's not real.
I don't think they believed it. I thought they just treated it as a joke.
But you do
I
it.
believed it.
But that's what matters. You believed it.
Yeah.
So now you're stuck in it.
Yeah.
So whether they believe it or not doesn't really matter. That's their problem. What matters is whether you believe it or not. And if you do, how is the quality of your life subjective to a belief that, like, what does that make? What sense does that make? I mean, I don't know. Maybe I don't know how old Tongan culture is. It goes back thousands of years. A bunch of Polynesians or primitives floated over on a coconut tree that fell in the water.
Yeah,
They landed there. Yeah, and then they figured out how to do things, and they made so many babies they didn't know what to do with them. So then suddenly, 30% of them, 40% of them would die anyway. So
Can't be that old because if the first of all go after education. Education's only been around 200 years.
that's right. That's right. We humans, when we went through the last ice age, we figured something out. Here's what happened. Conditions became extreme in many parts of the world. So only the strongest, healthiest, the right age young adults could go out and forage for food and hunt and do things like that. Because there were glaciers of snow and ice walls that were 1 or 2 kilometers high. There were saber-toothed tigers. There were woolly mammoths. There were giant bears. There were wolves. There was all sorts of things out there that would eat you. So children would not go out, and old people couldn't go out. And old is like if you're in your 40s, you're already old. So the grandparents stayed home with the children, and home was a cave. And it's the same model. It's the same humans. We haven't changed in the last at least 40,000 years. So this level of intelligence, of capacity, of whatever we have today, existed back then. So you got these newborn and toddlers and small children, and then you got these old, toothless, already old in their 40s folks, who realize that whatever story they tell the baby, that baby's going to believe it.
Oh yeah, that's the baby is the right age to look after them.
That's right. And then they teach them, when they grow up, you're going to take care of me. So they tell the story. The grandparent tells the story to the child, and the child believes it. And it begins repeated and repeated, and it becomes part of their mind, because mind is repetition. It's layers and layers and layers of repetition. There's so much value, high values towards family and towards culture and towards religion, because you have to keep repeating these constructs, otherwise they fall apart. They don't make any sense whatsoever. I'm pretty sure if you took a bunch of people and you isolated them from all the cultures and all the religions, that nobody would recreate them. Like you wouldn't have a bunch of Christians and Mohammedans and just de novo recreating themselves again. Who would come up with, the 10 Commandments and with all this stuff? Nobody would. People would just live their own way. Aboriginals, tribals, they didn't have any of these. They were considered pagans. They were the spirit of thunder and of the sun, the god of the sun, the god of the storm, right? The archetypes of the different animals, the totems, the spider, the scorpion, the wolf, the shark, right? Based on what was in front of them, but they wouldn't come up with, Judaism wouldn't re-evolve by itself. Hinduism wouldn't re-evolve by itself. Where would it come from? Who would make this stuff up? They're stories. They're great stories. I don't have anything against stories, but you got to understand that they're stories, and that people repeat this story so much that they believe them. And they believe them as children. And then we learn how to be emotionally repressed, and then we learn how to be sexually repressed. What happens is that the mental construct that we imprint, that we inherit, that we repeat onto ourselves over and over and over again, we begin to believe that it's real before we have the capacity to distinguish reality from mental projection. In other words, before puberty. And when puberty comes, well, we're supposed to stay virgin until we're married.
Yeah.
And sex is bad and dirty or this or that, right? There's guilt and shame. So then we never or rarely have the freedom to fully express ourselves emotionally, sexually, psychologically. And that operating system gets locked in. Those cultural values remain locked in. 10,000 years later, there's a problem because we've locked in thousands of years of mistakes, of randomness, of experiments that didn't work very well. And our mind is full of bugs and viruses and contradictions and traps. And now we can't see clearly. But meanwhile, we've developed calculus and geometry and computers and engineering and science on top of a baseline operating system which is already flawed. And we use it to enhance the so-called quality of life on the outside, but we don't do anything to know ourselves on the inside, so we miss out. There's something to be said about knowing yourself, knowing your body, knowing your emotions, and knowing all of your thoughts, all of your beliefs, all of your stories, and completing them. And just putting them down for a moment, just to see what's there without them. And after you see what's there, if you want to pick them back up again, you are a fully self-actualized adult. You can pick it back up. Like you can drop everything you have, see what's around you, and then you can pick it back up again if it empowers you to do so. The reality is most people choose not to pick this stuff up because it's out of date. It's like, would you keep your computer from 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago? It doesn't make any sense. Why would you keep an operating system that goes back thousands of years? You have a Tongan operating system that's controlling your values around your family, and it's limiting your personal development, your professional development. And what do the Tongans know about running a business?
Very bad.
Trading coconuts? Like, what did they do? Like, I'm not trying to make fun of them, but honestly, what was the highest level of sophistication of Tongan business culture before? Did they even have money? They traded wood nickels? Like, what? Right? So what does this have anything to do with how you're going to run your business? Well, in your mind, if it's all enmeshed, then it's actually a significant part of it. What does it have to do with reality today? So when you want to edit that out, when you want to like rewrite that script, those lines of code where you're taking the old BASIC and Fortran computing language of 20 years ago, and you're including it today in your new iPhone 50 or whatever comes next, it won't work. They have new programming languages today. I don't think this MacBook Air has BASIC in it. Hello, you're using BASIC or Fortran or Pascal? Because I learned that in university 25 years ago. 30 years ago, I learned how to program in BASIC. I don't think there's much of that left available today on this computer. So why would I hold on to the programming code of what Jesus said?
Oh, yeah.
Or what the Tongan said, or what the Peruvian said, or what the last Inca did, or like, who cares? Like, I mean, it's interesting. I'm not saying not be educated and informed about it, but what does that have to do with who I am right here, right now?
But what if my subconscious mind won't let it go?
Your subconscious mind, your unconscious mind is holding on to it without a doubt. That's the problem. It is holding on to it. Until you let it go, it's holding on to it. It's attached. We have emotional attachments. One of the things that you may notice, it's quite brilliant, it's high quality work, is that you go to an Anthony Robbins event, and you will have you visualize and imagine your fears, your dreams, your sorrows, your joys, what your life would be like if you change to this, what your life will be like in 10 years if you don't change this. And then he gets you to put energy into it, to scream, to shout, to wail, right? In UPW, there's one moment where everybody starts howling and screaming and wailing.
There's some horrible stuff behind me going on.
That's right. That's right. And they even say, if there's any children, now is the time to get them out of the room because this might be a little bit too intense for them because there's 10,000 people wailing and howling in horror of what their life is going to be like. So you take and you add an emotional charge to something that you want to make happen. So you add an emotional charge that's negative, an unresourceful, a yucky emotion, something that feels bleh, to a fear. And then you take your desires, your hopes, and your dreams, and you visualize your best, happiest moments. The best orgasm you've ever had. Right? The yummiest ice cream cone you've ever eaten. Just remember how yummy it was. And go and this is what you're doing is you're attaching an idea you have in your head about where you want to go and where you don't want to be. So you want to leave here to go here. And then you're attaching a sentimental charge to it. He's calling it an emotion. You're charging a so-called emotion, a psychological emotion, a sentiment, to it, and you repeat it over and over and over again. And that creates a charge in your body that pushes you and propels you in a certain direction. Of course, there's a cost to pay. It's not natural, it's not authentic, it's temporary. If you need to psych yourself up to get out of a hole, or you got to lift the burning car because your beloved is underneath it, and you and you do the superhuman thing and you lift the car up, that's okay. I'm all for that.
Yeah.
But if you have to do that every single day for the rest of your life to step up, there's just something that's not ecological. It doesn't make any sense.
No,
It's not sustainable.
It's
and it's not
something
good.
you have to hype up to.
You got to hype up to it. Yeah, exactly. So, stories of hellfire and heaven, of rewards, of punishments, get fed into the imaginations of children. Stories of culture and tradition, of your forefathers, and your forefathers' forefathers' forefathers. Go back. Plus, you become identified to your name, your culture, your religion, your political affiliations, the sports team that you like, the TV show that you watch, your gender, your sexuality. Everything just keeps adding layer and layer and layer and layer. You now have this construct of pure imagination that you confuse for reality because you can't put that construct down. Because if you do, you feel very alone, very naked, very weak, very isolated. You can't say, I have no family, I have no religion, I have no country, I'm nobody, nothing, nowhere, just this naked body sitting under a tree. What is it? That's terrifying for most people. So, and then people will go on, how are you doing that? Why are you going there? You're going to do what? How can you not be? Come back to the herd. Come back to the fold. Right? So then you never have the opportunity to just purely experience yourself beyond your ideas, your values, your beliefs, and your identifications. You're not emotionally free because you have to repress your anger or your sadness because you're a man or you're supposed to behave this way. You're not sexually free or liberated because you... So then you stay stuck with the same operating system, the same mind that keeps coming back, layers and layers, incarnations if you wish, however you want to call it. 10,000 layers of lasagna deep, and a lot of it is rotten on the inside. It has nothing to do with today. You would not want to eat a lasagna that was that old. If it was more than a week old, you wouldn't eat it, and yet you're living with a conscious, layered mind that's thousands of years old, and it needs to be put down in order to clear it so that you can then create a mind as needed in the moment to resolve the challenges of today. And you can drop it tonight so that tomorrow morning you can create a new mind, create new content, create a new operating system, a new app to solve the challenges of tomorrow, which will be self-evident tomorrow.
Sounds pretty awesome.
It is pretty awesome. It's super awesome. It allows you to just, it's like 1% of my efforts to go out and generate abundance in a creative way. The rest is just enjoying my life. I could put 100% into it, but then I would miss out other things. So I don't. There's no need to. But before I can change the operating system in this one, I have to close all the apps, shut all the windows, right? Stop updating, do whatever it is. And then I have to download a new operating system, and then I have to shut this off and allow it to replace and reboot itself with a new operating system. So in order to fully create an operating system for myself that will allow me to thrive in the world of today, I need to first plug the laptop in. That means plug it in would be the equivalent of get some good rest, eat well, rest well, stretch well, take care of breathe well, hydrate well, take care of the physical needs for this body to be fully charged. That's what that. Next, close all the apps and windows and stories in the background. That means you go through all the files, all your stories of your past. My mother did this, my father did that, I wish he did this, my brother, my sister, my lover, blah, 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 blah. They're all stories of yesterday. My grandfather didn't eat chicken. I like chicken. Too bad. Right? You begin clearing all of that. Then you start looking at the actual code that you have. How is this serving me? Am I still with the old thought process that I got in my education of money? Or do I understand what fiat currency and how it functions? Am I going to try to do everything at home, or am I going to and have my home business, or am I going to set up a corporate system that allows me to channel unlimited resources in a limited liability manner so I'm isolated and protected from it? Because as soon as I get rich, somebody's going to want to take a bite out of me, so I can only take so much. I don't own anything. Everything is under a corporate system that's taken care of. Right? Does that make sense? Yeah. And then, my values, my beliefs, what if I just put them all down? What if I stopped believing for a while? What would happen if I just dared to stop believing? God will smite you. Maybe. What if it's not true? How to know? Well, the only way to know is to just put this down and start over. And it doesn't take long to figure out what's going on. You do need a certain level, your needs need to be taken care of. You can't do it from a state of need and fear. You have to be able to create a little cocoon, a little bubble where you can reevaluate yourself. So your body's strong, you're emotionally clear, and you start going through your mind, and you start going, I don't need any of this. I just want to sit. I like sitting quietly and just staring at a blank wall and seeing what's there, or looking out at nature, and allowing myself just to be. And then a reset happens, which is worth experiencing, because then you never operate from fear again. Unless a king cobra jumps in your path and you leap out of the way before you even have time to think. And then you turn out that it's just a hose, a garden hose, and you laugh at yourself. Right? So imagine you have your favorite chocolate bar. Right? You like chocolate? Yeah. And the wrapper of the chocolate bar has a picture of your chocolate bar on it. So you have the chocolate bar and you have the wrapper. The wrapper is there to project an idea of what the chocolate looks like, so your imagination can say, ooh, that looks like a yummy chocolate, I want to eat it. It's a pure mental construct. The picture of the chocolate. Right? It makes you want a chocolate. That's mind, that's projection. The chocolate bar is actual, it's real, it's existential reality. You actually eat it and taste it. Living in your mind, living in your projections, you're chasing your hopes and your dreams. It's like wanting to lick the wrapper. Feeling your way through the chocolate is literally putting the chocolate in your mouth and letting it melt in your mouth and eating it and swallowing it and enjoying it. Now, once you've tasted the chocolate, would you ever sit there and drool over a wrapper? It's like the difference between porn and a lover. A real lover right there and porn. But can't we get caught up in porn and believe that it's real? And actually have a physiological response or release to porn, and it's just a picture in your head. Or you can have a real lover. And more people go towards porn because it's easier. There's less complications, there's no back talk, there's no headaches. Right? You pay for it once, it's done. Right? Does that make sense? But it's porn. It's not reality. It's an illusion. Chasing dreams and goals and ambition out of desire or from fear is still porn. It's still an illusion. You're still just licking the wrapper of the chocolate, pretending to have a good experience. You're not actually eating the chocolate. Yeah. Eating the chocolate is a richer experience. 1 million wrappers of chocolate still are not anywhere near as one tiny little piece of chocolate. There's just no comparison. A drop, a little corner, a little shaving of that chocolate is always richer, even than a million empty wrappers. So whatever your mind is projecting, as rich as your dreams and your fantasies may be, it's always a photoshopped image of reality. It's never actual reality. Now, you can dream about having a Ferrari and then work one day and sit in a Ferrari. Okay. Yeah, sure. The people who chase after a Ferrari because of their dreams usually get bored with it pretty quickly too. Mind is content. And it's like a code. There's a code to your consciousness. It's layers and layers of repetition. There are techniques for getting information into your mind, adding content to your mind. There's one technique known in the NLP world as a sandwich technique. The sandwich technique works in the following way. We have 3 lines of code. The first line and the last line are things that are easy for you to accept. The middle one, the one in the middle of the sandwich, is that which you want to put in there, but your subconscious, your unconscious would reject. Right? So if you wanted to say, I'm going to empty out and clear out my nonsense conditioning about my Tongan family values. I want it out. You could repeat it 1,000,000 times. It won't come out. Because it's so ingrained into your being. It goes so against the family. What are you going to do? What are you going to replace it with? So you don't have a family anymore. You disowned your family. You walk away from your brothers. You tell your sister to just go away. Right? How are you going to do that? Right? So you use this technique with conscious awareness to start changing the lines of code. So you start with something very simple that is easy to accept. And you write. And you always write it in cursive language. Yeah? And you write, ad-libs, where there's a sentence that has a blank space that can be filled in, and then it continues within a blank space. So the basic structure of the code is, tonight and each and every night, in my dreams, and then you have a blank, I will release, let go, surrender, transcend, right? Go beyond my fears or my sadness or my family values or my beliefs or my conditionings, my cultures about this story, that story, this event, that event, whatever. Right? So in the first one, I will sleep tonight and each and every night. I sleep deeply and peacefully.
Yeah. Accept that one.
Accept that. In my dreams, I release my family values, my fears, my insecurities, my repressions, my angers, and you work with one thing at a time. Yeah? So you can release that. And then the third line is that I awaken, refreshed, relaxed, more present, ready to do my work, ready to keep working on myself, whatever positive thing you want to add. So you start with a positive, and you clear out a negative, and then you add a positive. And you write that in a little journal before you go to bed every night. It's the last thing you write down. And you date it and you sign it. And by doing this every single night, you're giving your mind instructions. And the last thought you have before you turn off the light and close your eyes, that you're going to clear out this belief, this limiting belief about being the fifth. Or my anger, my fear, my anger towards my brother, towards my mother, towards my family, towards my lover who cheated on me, my insecurity, my guilt, my shame, the roots of my shame, my guilt, my fear, whatever it is. That's it. You just write that every single day. And it'll slowly start to clear up. And then something else will come up, and then you write that down, and it'll clear out. Final territory of mind, the one that touches just about everything, and will basically create the wiring for the amount of thoughts that you can carry. Just like you have wiring for the electricity of how much current you can carry, we have wiring in our mind for how much currency you can channel effectively. And that's the territory of money. So everybody has a script, a wiring sort of thing about how much currency, how much money they can channel before it's too much and they start to burn out or sabotage. Or how low you're going to go before you have to step in and go out and get a job, do something. Like, will you allow yourself to be a bum on the street, or beforehand would you just go out and make sure you can find a job so that you can at least pay for a room and have a nice, a nice bed to sleep in? Right? Everybody's a little bit different. But what you have depends on the environment that you were born into. So whatever socioeconomic class you were born into and raised in, those are the basic parameters that you're going to have. If you want to move up out of that, then you're going to need to do some sort of work. Now, this is where wealth coaching comes in, right? So you invest in yourself and you take courses and you find coaches and mentors and teachers that help you go up, and you start learning and you make mistakes and you lose money and then you make money and then you lose money and then you make money. But there is a certain amount of wealth that you can channel before you start to sabotage yourself. And this is self-evident in athletes, artists, rock stars, rap stars, right? People that come from inner cities, from poor environments, low-income environments, and suddenly make millions. And then somehow they manage to lose the millions, get in debt, or become addicted, hooked on drugs, or have accidents, or do something and just lose it all. So there is value in identifying what your actual wiring is for the amount of wealth that you can channel. And there is value in understanding that you can increase the amount of currency that you can channel, the amounts of wealth that you can feel comfortable with. But in order to do that, you have to know where you are. So there's exercises that you can do to figure out what your upper limits are and what your lower limits are, and they will basically be reflected in the history, your financial history, so to speak. The most amount of money you make before you sabotage, or you let it go, or you sign it over to your brother, for example. The least amount before you go out and get a job and start working or find a way to get yourself up. So there's going to be a certain level. When you identify that, you can then start working your way up and increasing it. In order to do that, you need to be aware of the kind of thoughts that you have. So you're going to have, as you're mapping out your thoughts, your body's healthy, your mind, your emotions are clear, you start thinking the thoughts, and you have thoughts about money, about your freedom, about your dynamic range of what you can do, of what you can afford, of what you can't afford. The Robert Kiyosaki's book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, is an excellent resource for looking at what kind of poor thoughts you have, thoughts that keep you poor, and what kind of rich thoughts you have. So it's a good resource for that, and it's really important to look at your own personal thoughts about what you invest in yourself, how you feel about money, having money, losing money, investing money in yourself. What quality of life experience will you invest in yourself? And then you can determine what amount of money you need, what amount of cash flow or income you need in order to create the optimal space for you to be able to reset yourself, reprogram yourself, and be able to thrive. In other words, the caterpillar needs to eat, get fat and juicy until it reaches a critical size. Once it has a certain amount of reserves, it creates a cocoon that it spins around itself, and it has everything it needs then to transform itself into a butterfly and then come out of the cocoon. If it doesn't grow enough, then it won't be able to complete itself as a butterfly. And if it keeps trying to grow, it gets too big, and then it can't put a cocoon around itself, and then one day a bird is going to grab it and eat it. Or it won't make it. So there is a specific amount, a range that is going to be appropriate for you. And you may already be at that range. You may already have what you need, which is why you can branch out and start looking for other ways to enrich yourself. However, if you don't do anything to increase the mental construct, the concept you have of money, then you're not going to be able to go beyond that without, in other words, effortlessly, without sabotaging or finding some sort of contradiction. What I find is that most wealth coaches will just talk about making more money, and you pay and you invest in making more money, so you start increasing the amount of money that you can have. But very few are willing to look at the poor thoughts. thoughts, the negative thoughts. They want to cover them up. It's interesting to go in and uncover them and pull them out. Rich Dad book is a good asset for that, a good resource for that. Yeah. There is a technique that you can use. It's sort of like a yoga for money, a way of stretching your capacity of the wirings of your mind. And that requires actually putting a value on your time, how much your time is worth. And then create a savings book, or mental currency account, so that you can start making deposits in the savings book. It's all a psychological game. You're just increasing your capacity to be comfortable with certain numbers as they grow. And then you start adding, and I'll show you how to do that, so that you can then become used to seeing larger and larger and larger numbers and adding value, investing in yourself. So the way to do that is to first determine what your best work, what your value of your time is going to be. And you pick a number, which could be 100 an hour, 50 an hour, 1,000 an hour, whatever it is. So whatever number is realistic, close to what you're actually making, or how much money you need in order to be able to create a space for yourself, in order to be able to grow. So what you do is you keep a log of all the things that you do to empower yourself. For example, you spend an hour doing yoga every day. So you make a deposit at your time of, let's say, pick a number, right? 500 an hour, 200 an hour, 1,000 an hour, and you write that down. And you go and you do a raw food cooking class. You spend 3 hours doing that, or 3 days, or whatever it is, and you write down the number of hours as you're making a deposit in yourself. Then, instead of going and buying cheap food at the bulk food cheap marketplace, you go out of your way to drive an extra 20 minutes to go to the little organic shop where the food costs you 50% more, 100% more, but you take more time and more energy, and then you write down all the extra money that you invest in yourself. You go to a course, you go see J.T. Fox or Tony Robbins, and you do a course, you're investing in yourself. You buy a book to empower an ocean, you write down how much you spent. You spend hours working on it and reading it. You add all of that down. And you keep adding and adding and adding. Now, if you suddenly find yourself doing something that's self-destructing or sabotaging yourself, then you're going to do a debit at 2 times the cost. So you go out, you get really drunk, and you're hungover, and you waste 6 hours of your life. Well, it's 6 times your value times 2. You debit it.
What about taking the kids to the movies?
Some things are neutral,
Okay.
so it doesn't matter. Other things add value to your life, like eating breakfast. You eat breakfast every day, so what's the big deal, right? Sleeping, you sleep every day, right? But anything you do to improve yourself, you start adding value to that.
Yep.
And every day you add it up, and you have a total deposit that you date and sign, and then the next day that's your starting point, and you keep adding and adding and adding and adding and adding. And it starts building up. You do this, it takes a couple of years. You can't just completely change the script you have. You have to slowly start adding. And then you have to step up, because if you're a $10 an hour person and you want to get to $100 an hour, you got to start investing in yourself. In other words, you need to literally go out and buy the better food. If you're going to travel from here to there for a business meeting, and you want to make money and you feel like a wealthy person, you need to start investing in business class seats. You can't just do the cheap thing. You have to physically go out and start paying for coaching, which is more valuable, doing whatever it is that you know works for you psychologically, but then you anchor it by actually purchasing the experiences, investing in yourself. Right? Does that make sense? And that will slowly start to increase the numbers that you're comfortable with. And at the same time, you need to look at what your limiting thoughts, your limiting beliefs, and your stories are about money that make you get poor. You need to get to a place where there's a continuity of standing up. Getting to a place where you're now thriving, you're making millions, you're growing more, but you're begging for a discount at the grocery store, or at the mini mart, or whoever it is has a product to sell you. It's a good product, it's a fair price, and you know that They don't get that many clients and customers, and you negotiate, and you get a better price out of it. This is a contradiction as far as increasing your sense of inner wealth is concerned. Because your inner wealth grows when more people's inner wealth grows. The richer people feel, the more you respect their value, the more they're going to respect your value. Saying that you're worth more, and you're going to, even though you have more resources and you're a cutthroat negotiator, and you have the money, you could pay for it, and you choose not to. You get a thrill out of getting the cheapest possible price, even though you could afford the most expensive. This is not. This will be a contradiction. At some point, you get to a point where you have enough that you pay and you tip extra. You start sharing more abundance as you can. And this will slowly start getting your mind thinking in a way that allows you to start generating, channeling, and collecting more abundance. But you have to be consistent with it. You can't be thinking only of making money and then being cheap.
Do I include, the 6 hours at work every day?
If your work is something that, not necessarily, you're already getting paid for that work.
Yeah.
But if you were to take an internship in a company that allows you to expand, and you're working an extra 2 or 3 hours for free, but you're using it to improve yourself, so that you would do that, right?
So it's, I'm documenting the extra self-improvement work that I do.
Yes.
And I'm deducting anything that is actually a negative, which is actually not just neutral, but it's actually a negative.
That's right. Everything you're working, for example, to get your body stronger and healthier and peak performance. Everything you're doing to clear out your emotions.
I include going to the gym and that too.
Absolutely, yeah. Because you're doing it, especially if you're putting awareness into being healthier and stronger and doing better, right? Because you're doing anything to improve yourself. Now, if you then decide to go in and feel sorry for yourself, and you get into a fight with your brother and everything, well, then that's a negative, right? Whatever allows you to get sharper, better, clearer. You start adding layers. So it gives a signal to the mind, a message to the mind, that everything you do to empower yourself adds value to you. And mind is repetition. So the more you repeat it, the more value you start adding to yourself. And one day you will reach a value where you have an inner value, an inner worth of millions and millions and millions. You're worth it, and you know you're worth it. So you start to attract it, and you certainly wouldn't give it away. You couldn't be controlled or manipulated into letting it go, for example.